right, welcome to the Sensitive and Neurodivergent podcast. I'm your guest host, Carol Roesler, and I am here with a very special guest. We have Lara Rodwell. She is the founder of the Lonely Club, and she is an amazing journalist who is on a mission to help validate and encourage all autistic and sensitive and neurodivergent people in their 20s to overcome the loneliness that so many of them feel. And so, welcome, Laura. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited too.
Now, I think first it would be a great idea to talk about a little bit about what made you decide to create the Lonely Club. I love the name of it. We've talked before that my daughter is right in the age range that you are helping to support, and she's 21. She is sensitive autistic neurotype, and she has dealt with loneliness for so long. So just reading, Laura wrote a beautiful blog, and I'm going to put the link in the show notes for the founder of the sensitive empowerment community, Julie Bjelland, who was also the regular host of this wonderful podcast. And Julie and Laura combined to create something to reach out to an age group that I think is often left aside and not recognized, right, Laura?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so I think I wanted to start with I have the blog here. I could read every word of it over and over again, and that could be a wonderful podcast right there, but we really want to hear from you. So I wanted to start with the title that you picked, which was Why Misdiagnosis Keeps Sensitive Autistic Women Lonely and How Self-Discovery Changes Everything. How
Yeah.
did you come to choose that as the title? And what are some of the encouraging messages we could give to sensitive women in their 20s right now that are listening to you?
Yeah. So the title massively came from my experience of basically self-identifying as autistic, sensitive autistic neurotype for the past couple of years. And I have went on this whole self-discovery journey myself as someone who's very self-aware, very into journaling, mindfulness, yoga, very intuitive. I knew that I knew that it was true for me. But I'm based in the UK and I basically got on the waiting list for a autism diagnosis assessment with the NHS. And it was an extremely long wait. It was around 10 months of
Wow.
waiting, and I couldn't afford a private assessment at the time. So, what I did is I self-identified as autistic, started accommodating for myself as if I was autistic. And it was it was actually a very lonely journey because when I told my family and friends, they said, "Oh, you're not autistic. Like, you're the most sociable person ever. You love a deep chat. You're such a people person, all of this." But what they couldn't see was the cost that it's always taken to maintain that mask. Um, so I went through with this NHS assessment, and basically, long story short, they said that I wasn't autistic. I didn't meet the criteria on the DSM, and I they diagnosed me as having social anxiety and trauma. So I've went through quite a lot of trauma in my life, um, and the assessors said my issues were due to that, and emotional dysregulation. I came away from that assessment, and because I'd been consuming all of this podcast and as well as all of Julie's content for the past 2 years, my first instinct was to get a private assessment, but not just any autism assessment. I really intuitively knew that I was like sensitive autistic neurotype, but I had so much self-doubt, and I faced so much imposter syndrome along the way, as well as doubt from externally from other people. So when I got that misdiagnosis, it was almost like I couldn't trust myself and I felt really disconnected from myself. up until I had the assessment with Julie, all confirmed, everything's fine, in my head at least, and it's all aligned with my truth. So yeah, I think the reason I titled a blog post this is because it's extremely, extremely lonely to go through that misdiagnosis process. And also beforehand, the invalidation, I think a lot of like diagnosed women face in terms of people not understanding what the sensitive autistic neurotype looks like. And there's a lot of stereotypes and misunderstanding that in itself is extremely isolating.
Oh, wow. There's so much to talk about there. I could not relate more because here I am, just within my life, I didn't get my diagnosis until this year. So I'm 60 years old. So I spent decades, exactly as you share, the pain of being misunderstood. And then my daughter is 21 and she was having her diagnosis with Julie. And I also, just like you, was listening to all of Julie's podcasts, reading all of her work. I'm in her sensitive empowerment community. We have an autism group within that community where a lot of people talk about what you mentioned, the imposter syndrome. And as I was trying to educate myself to support my daughter, I was like, oh my goodness, this is me. And as more as I listened to Julie, just like you, I realized, wow, this is exactly she has really discovered, she calls it the sensitive autistic neurotype to help explain and validate not only to those of us that are that type, but to other people that it falls under all the there's so many different neurotypes. But basically,
Yeah,
and what she also helps us to understand, which I think is so important to include in this discussion, is that it is something that we are born with that's a gift. It's a way that we experience the world that's very unique to us. And you can take me, Julie, my daughter, all of us are under that sensitive autistic neurotype umbrella, but each one of us have these amazing abilities, right? To do things. Like you are an amazing writer. I was telling before we started recording that you can just start reading Laura's blog. Again, I'm going to link that in the show notes so everyone can enjoy it. But I felt like immediately like I knew like I was in the room with you, and it's such a gift to be able to do that. And so all of the sensitive autistic neurotype, not only are we completely misunderstood, but wouldn't you say that there's so much undervaluing the special magical gifts that we were born with?
yeah. I think there's not enough of like really bringing out those gifts. Like, if for my whole childhood, I was always told I was too sensitive. And what I now am starting to see as my gifts were always seen as my weaknesses and what made me a smaller, weaker person. I used to get called too sensitive, or I'm not assertive or not enough, or I have an identical twin sister and I'm like the soft twin and she's the one who kind of sets boundaries and stands her ground and stuff. And it's always been framed as a weakness. But I really channel that in creative ways, such as my writing. So, yeah,
The word that comes to mind to me is like a survivor. Like you've managed, you are a role model for everyone of all generations, someone that's survived being misunderstood and that horrible acute loneliness, which I also experienced as a child and all through my decades until really recently. And that we're able to survive through that and then thrive. I mean, look what you're doing. It's just amazing. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Lonely Club and how it can help people, but I want to make sure we go back for a minute to the part about your misdiagnosis because as you write in your blog, and we've heard this from Julie when she discusses this in her podcast and her research, that there's what's quote unquote called a gold standard out there. And unfortunately, we try to say this with compassion for the doctors that are trying to do their best with very, very rigid and limited research. And one of the things that Julie Bjelland talks about in all of her work is that all of the ways that the standard was created was focused on young white male boys. And that doesn't have any reflection on women. And it can be women who are in their 20s, it can be women in their 60s, women in their 50s. The whole gamut of us sensitive women were completely left out of the study. And so right now we're all trying to rise up and get our voices heard so that all the women behind us don't have to go through that, right, Laura?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's it's so frustrating. It's not only lonely, but it's frustrating when you've done the level of research and you've almost become an expert in this area yourself, and then someone who asked you these very kind of superficial kind of questions, I didn't feel like the assessors knew me, said that, you know, invalidated my experience. And I'm so grateful that I had the kind of grit and the drive to push through and say, no, this isn't right, because I'm sure a lot of women out there would take that misdiagnosis and say, oh, well, I obviously don't deserve support, or um, my experience isn't worthy of this kind of like framing. And for me, I was like, no, like I can't, I need to do it for myself, but I need to do it for other women as well, because I know that I can thrive a lot more knowing who I am. And I needed confirmation of that.
Oh, you're a groundbreaker. I mean, you should get up every day and feel so proud of who you are. And I that thing you said about being told that you're too sensitive, it's unbelievable that common thread that we all share. We are all very unique. We all have very special abilities that come through our sensitivities that need to be honored and celebrated. But the common thread amongst all of us is being told you're too sensitive. I was just the other day actually having a moment where I was journaling and expressing through tears, trying to reach out when I was little to my dad, who was a research scientist. So everything was very, very data based. And that was the theme with us. When I would come to him upset, he would say that that I was too sensitive, that I needed a tougher shell. And I look back now with compassion because he was like those assessors that you went to, that so many women are going to, did not have the data. I like to think if he was alive now and had all the data, that perhaps he would have a completely different view of sensitivities. And that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to take the people that are out there making these assessments that think they're doing the right thing, that think that they have this little box that they're supposed to check off all these things. And if the person doesn't fit in that box, okay, we're stamping, nope, it's not valid, and moving on. And that's not helping. We have to believe that they want to help their patients. So I'm hoping that some of them are listening to this. Some
Yeah.
of them can be led to Julie Bjelland's research. I'm certainly going to put her autism research links in my show notes. She also does autism assessments all around the globe. People can get on from the privacy of their own home on video and do it. That's the way I did it. My daughter did it, and you did it with Julie. She's able to reach people all around the world. But she, like she and I talk about, she's only one woman and she's trying to reach every woman on the globe. And so this is incredible that you're gifting us with your time, Laura. And we hope the podcast goes to 191 countries now. So I'm like getting little chills imagining sensitive women of all ages around the world listening, but particularly the age group that you are just sort of taking into your arms and taking care of. And I wanted to share, so my daughter is 21. She's in her senior year at university. Just like you and me, we've talked about, she is a very high achiever, straight A's on the dean's list, but goes through massive waves of loneliness and being misunderstood. And one of the things that I will just touch on briefly that has been so challenging is to get support for her. And I would love to get your thoughts on this, in order to get her her own room, because in her junior year she was placed in a room with several other neurotypical students that ended up bullying her because they misunderstood her expression of her autism. And so she would go to class and thrive and be rewarded by her professors. And then she would come back and be belittled and misunderstood and straight up bullied. And so we advocated for her, and she did a great job. And they had to get campus security involved. And the end result, Laura, was that she had to get a letter from Julie Bjelland saying that she proving that she was autistic and register with what they call disability services on her campus. And again, it resulted, we're grateful that she has her own private room for senior year so she can take care of herself and support herself. But what are your thoughts on that for 20 somethings out there right now that are trying to advocate? In the United States, it is still labeled under disability. You're autistic, you have a disability.
Yeah. I know it's very, very similar in the UK. The first thing that comes to mind is that I'm so grateful that Lucy, your daughter, had the support from her family, and the awareness about from Julie and all of the self-discovery that she's done to get to a point where you were able to advocate. I think for a lot of 20 somethings out there, including myself when I was 18, 19, 21 at university, you don't have the awareness because in the past decade, this topic has been talked about more and more, which is fantastic. But 10 years ago, when I was at university, it wasn't. And I thought that because I couldn't seem to function and socialize with neurotypical, in the UK, we call them freshers. So when you've just started university, people my age, I didn't want to go out partying. I couldn't socialize in the same way as everybody
Right.
else. I thought there was something wrong with me. And I internalized all of that as shame. And over the years, it's like the shame has bottled up and bottled up and bottled up to the
Mm.
point where I just couldn't live like it anymore. And I needed answers. Um, so I genuinely think that the first step for 20 something year olds in that similar position is self-awareness and learning as much as you can about yourself, from all of the amazing resources available so that you can start advocating for change, positive change in your life.
Oh, what a wow, that was so well put. And it's so amazing to me because I went to college in the 80s, same thing. I felt the same.
Mm,
I mean, we have so much, you and I know so many women listening of all generations can really relate to this. And I told you that my daughter read your blog and I had she asked me to circle a spot and read to you. So I'm going to read your own words to you. And then I'd like to have you share a little bit more for all of the young women out there that are sensitive and autistic in their 20s listening. So Lucy said her favorite, she loved the whole thing, but her favorite passage was how when Laura wrote, suddenly so many confusing moments made sense. Oh, that's why I've always struggled to maintain friendships. That's why I feel pain and joy so deeply. That's why I always felt like I was living on a different frequency. For the first time, I realized I wasn't broken. I wasn't a bad person. There was never anything wrong with me. And I'm going to add this sentence at the end here. You wrote, my diagnosis became a homecoming, the beginning of reconnecting not only with myself, but with others too. That is so beautiful. Lucy wanted me to tell you that you might have well been reading her mind. She felt so connected and so encouraged and validated and uplifted by what you wrote. And I would love to have you talk a little bit more about what that homecoming feeling felt like to you, because that's what we want everyone to find, isn't it?
yeah. I'm so grateful that I found that at age 27 because I know that for so many women it happens a lot later, in life. So when when I had my assessment with Julie and when she validated my experience. It just felt like everything clicked into place, and that my whole life of struggle that I always experienced by myself in my own head, it suddenly was out there in the world. And I almost had a label to be able to connect with people and say, like, this is why, if you're interested in learning more about it or researching, go ahead. And actually that will probably make us a lot closer, because I'm an expert in this topic. And it's interesting because I think a lot of sensitive people and autistic neurodivergent people, they relate to each other, so they connect. You're naturally drawn to
Yeah.
people who have similar brains to you. So sorry, I've completely forgotten the question.
Oh, we were
Um,
talking about the homecoming feeling. I think
yeah,
you answered it beautifully. And when
yeah,
you made me think of something that Julie talks about, where she says that I think this would be great for people to understand that this, maybe they're listening and this is all new to them. That they're like, well,
mm,
what is this sensitive autistic neurotype? And
yeah,
she always talks about it like there we have moments of brilliance that we're grabbing at all the time. And then we each have that way of expressing. I like to think of it like our inner sparkle, like we sparkle and
yeah,
radiate out these very special, specific things, and they can be seen instantly by other sensitive and autistic people. I mean, like I just feel so comfortable talking to you, and I know I feel so comfortable talking to Julie, and in the sensitive empowerment community where we belong that Julie created. I've been a member there for about 3 years now. And in our sensitive, we have a special group for, because we have HSPs or highly sensitive people from all over the world in the main group. And then she made a special group for the sensitive autistic neurotype. And it's incredible in there because all of them are where we're all speaking about the same things that you share, but within our own personal way. It's definitely
yeah,
not one blanket thing that fits all. I think that's one of the problems with the neurotypical, as Julie teaches us. So the brain that's a different type of brain than our brain. There's more of that brain on the planet. So there's been this box that's been created of what's normal, what's supposed to be normal. And then if you don't fit into that, you don't look like what everyone's been trained through the television programs, through movies, through all the things of what's normal, then you're put off over to the side as there's something wrong that needs to be eradicated out of us, medicated out of us, tamped down, that is just too much, right? That is so wrong. It's so wrong, isn't it?
yeah. It couldn't be more wrong. And I feel proud of the way my brain works now. And now that I have an explanation for it, I love what my brain enables me to create and the connections that it enables me to have. And all of the things that I thought was too much and too intense, and I felt so deeply growing up, and I didn't fit in, and I always had to kind of really dial down how I felt around other people. Those things are actually beautiful, and that's allowed me to get to where I am today and become so passionate about providing that safe space for other young people, because it's exactly what I needed growing up.
Oh, that just gave me a little chill. I just think that's so important for people to hear. And it's like the idea that whatever way that we suffered growing up because people didn't understand us can actually be turned into our purpose. You have turned that into your life's purpose, and how inspiring for women of all ages. So I'm so proud of you and what you're doing. And I was so excited to connect my daughter and other of her friends. One of the things that I love on her campus here in California, they really celebrate neurodivergent of all sorts. It's quite amazing. There was nothing like that certainly when you were in university and when I was in university. And I think one of the things that is so important if we talk about how lonely people feel on campus, how lonely autistic 20 somethings feel on a university campus, we can go back to the fact that I think it's like an echo back to when we were little. If we start out feeling that deep sense of loneliness, it never really goes away until what you so beautifully wrote about, we find a homecoming through understanding and also choosing who we're going to keep around us that understand us and support us. And I
Yeah.
have a quote that I was going to share with you and everyone listening from Carl Jung about loneliness. And so I'm going to read this for us, and then I'd love to get your thoughts because I found this amazing. When I first read this back in 2018, I thought, oh, here I am in my mid 50s then, and Carl Jung, lived a long time ago, but he's talking about a childhood that felt so familiar to me. And then I read your blog, and it was if you, me, and him were talking about the same, experiencing the same level of childhood loneliness, but each in our own unique way. So he says, as a child, I felt myself to be alone, and I am still, because I know things and must hint at things others apparently know nothing of, and for the most part do not want to know. Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem so important to oneself, or from holding certain views which others find inadmissible. So what does that bring up for you, Laura?
I think what makes me the most sad is the cost of having those feelings. If I look back at my own childhood, because I felt exactly as Carl Jung put in that quote, just like I didn't fit in, I turned to unhealthy coping mechanisms and was so self-critical and had so many thoughts of there's something wrong with me. And I think that that's the saddest thing, that if I had somebody there who was like, you're not broken, you're beautiful the way you are, then it would have prevented so much more suffering. And I think that's what's so important about addressing loneliness early on, specifically in this neurotype, because loneliness is very normal. It's a very normal human emotion to
Yeah.
feel lonely because humans are naturally wired to connect socially. So experiencing loneliness is normal, but what we need to do is prevent it from becoming long term and chronic, um, because that's when it has impacts on your mental health, physical health, emotional health. And yeah, I wish there was more interventions that met those lonely children exactly as that quote kind of painted, where they were at then, and made them feel seen so that it would prevent the years, it can be years, decades even, of suffering.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with everything you said, and I think it would really help if you and I share about, so we mentioned before that this gold standard of assessing autism is looking backwards, and there's so much more. If people are interested in really digging into this, they can read your writing, and they can also go through Julie Bjelland's research, which I will link her website. But the research criteria, so it's coming from the young male white boys. That is the way that we're the lens they're looking through. That's all external, right? That's what Julie teaches us that people are used to when they hear the word autism. A lot of triggers, fear, misunderstanding will flare up because people will picture like a young boy rocking in a corner, unable to make eye contact. I know that when my daughter and I were at her school, I ended up, pulling her out of school in third grade and homeschooling her through ninth grade because of everything we're talking about here, but just being completely misunderstood and not supported by the teachers. And when I look back, of course, maybe they didn't have a frame of reference, but there were some
Yeah.
young boys at the school that expressed in this way. And that certainly is on the huge spectrum of neurodiversity. There is that category that, of course, needs to be treated with love, respect, and care. But we're having an entire area that's completely missed, which is all of our expression of autism is internal, and it's beautiful internal gifts. And you wrote about this, about the depth. I love this part here where you were talking about carrying a quiet kind of loneliness that no diagnosis ever quite explained. And also, you talked about if you could be any animal, when people ask that, what would you be? And what was your answer?
Chameleon. Yeah.
Yeah, can you
Which,
explain that? Yeah,
yeah,
please share about that because it has to
yeah,
do with so much of what we're talking about.
yeah. It's fascinating to look back, and I think, I mean, a lot of kids, especially, that question was quite common. I remember growing up, like, oh, if you could be an animal, what would you be? And sometimes I wouldn't say it. I remember saying it out loud, but I thought it was quite weird
Hmm.
because I thought, well, like, why? The first thing that always came to my head was a chameleon. And it's only, in the past couple of years that I look back and think, well, yeah, it's because I wanted to blend into the surroundings. I just wanted to feel like I fit in. And
Yes.
I tried so hard my whole life to fit in that I didn't know it was okay, and actually not only okay, like beautiful not to, and to be my unique personality. But the chameleon made a lot of sense from a psychological point of view because all I've always wanted to do is just blend in to the background. And that makes you feel invisible. And it is this quiet kind of loneliness where you feel like you can't speak your truth or show up in the world as yourself, um, when you can. You just need to give yourself that permission.
Oh, wow. I know that reached a lot of people. That was like, wow, here Laura did it again. She took my childhood, my daughter's, and you expressed it so, so beautifully. And I know that for like I was raised in the 60s and the 70s, and I think it translates to you were speaking about the same thing in your generation where we were raised to be very, very polite as women, really, and when we're brought up in a household where one sibling needs a lot of attention and sort of as there's a demand around that care. I also grew up with I was adopted into a family with a sister that had mental illness challenges and bipolar, and my role was to disappear. So I really related to your chameleon thing because I remember working very hard to not cause any problems, to do everything perfectly, I loved going to school because I wanted to get the praise from my teachers. And when we are this neurotype, we do have these gifts where things come very easily to us. Some subjects, some things that we're passionate about, and every once in a while you get an amazing teacher, right, that actually sees us. But a lot of the time at school, there is sort of a thing of what a normal student is supposed to be doing. Like I can remember hours of being pushed to go out to recess. That's what it's called in America, where you have to go outside, and all the boys were running around kicking balls at you, and I would run and hide in the bathroom, or I would hide in the library and ask the librarian if I could help dust the books because I didn't want to be out there. And so that was perceived as I had some sort of a social problem,
Yeah.
right? And it's similar to you. So uh,
Yeah. I,
let's
I
speak.
experienced exactly the same.
Yes, let's speak to everyone listening about, let's speak to the parents and the teachers of sensitive autistic female girls and in their 20s and young girls and girls in high school. What do we want them to understand from this conversation?
I personally, all I've ever wanted was to feel seen. So, as much as my parents were amazing growing up, there's generational stigma around mental health and stuff.
Mhm.
And because I was so quiet and people pleasery and, I was very polite, didn't want to cause a fuss, I feel like my social issues were kind of swept under the carpet. Um, and that just led to me thickening this mask of everything's fine. I'll just do really well at school, but this is just a part of my personality that's wrong with me. What I would, if I was going to give any teacher, any parent, any advice, it would be to just make your child feel seen, however that might look like for them, whether that's sitting down and having a conversation or even getting like a mentor at school, just any form of support, just being curious and in their internal world instead of taking how they're presenting on the outside as face value. Because I can pretty much 100% guarantee you that there's a lot more going on behind the surface, underneath the surface, than high achieving, like people pleasery, shy, sensitive student, child, daughter, and they deserve to feel seen.
Oh, that was beautiful. That is exactly right. And it made me imagine that picture where we've seen pictures of an iceberg where there's the water and there's this little bit of it peeking out and then underneath there's so much more. And I
Yeah.
think that I also thought of a quote that helped my daughter and I in high school because in high school she could not she tried really hard to connect to a group of girls there, and they tried their best to be friendly to her, but they were not sensitive autistic neurotype, and we couldn't seem to find anyone that was like her. And she'd come from all these years of homeschooling with me where she and I are the same, so I supported her just by being myself and being in awe of all her gifts. I mean, she just blew me away. And so I think about we had this little post-it note on the wall that said, "You may be too much for some people. Those are not your people." Right? And so you
Yeah,
are helping to, for everyone listening to you, to help these caregivers, these parents, these teachers to understand that whatever it is that their impression is too much, or or whatever we're being labeled too sensitive, it's just really a huge misunderstanding, isn't it?
yeah, it really is. And actually, the more pressure there is to fit in with everybody else, the more isolated and kind of um in towards themselves, and the more they're going to bottle that up. And I think the opposite is true when we embrace young people's unique personalities, unique gifts, and help them use those gifts to maximize their potential in whatever area it is that they're passionate about.
Oh, I love that so much. And I before we get to, I want you to share about creating the Lonely Club and how people can find it, how they can feel included with all of your wonderful thoughtfulness. I also read, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to, you have a place we can go to read all of your writing. And
Yeah,
I was particularly taken by an article. I wanted to have you speak about this a little bit, where you were writing about your age group right now, how you have a job, but there's so many out there that are, I should let you say it in your own words, but it's this struggle to feel, to manage all the anxiety and all the worry about going out in the world. I mean, it's bad enough to be lonely at university or in your college years, but I would love to have you share about that sort of that in between phase where you're not in school, you don't know what job you want. You're suddenly everyone's asking, what are you going to do now, or and all of that. And
yeah.
even if you want to touch a little bit, you brought in about the fear that your generation's facing with artificial intelligence taking away some of the jobs too.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think with social media as well, young people have a lot more access to a lot more information, which can be amazing, but it can also fuel a lot of anxiety. And if you put on that, say, the cost of living crisis and how expensive it is to do quite a lot of things nowadays, especially socializing, which is a massive factor in loneliness and social health. Um, it all kind of adds up to this feeling of like just wanting to hide under a rock sometimes. And it's this fear that life is difficult and there are certain factors that make it harder for young people. And then you put the pandemic into that, and the pandemic, there's so much research around the effect that that had on young people's
Oh,
mental health, social anxiety. So I think young people nowadays, when they're in that in between stage, especially when you've moved out of high school, you might not have started university yet, you're not in a structure like an ecosystem. I think young people need to be treated with so much care, and sensitivity to really, like, I think, prevent their mental health as a preventative measure in terms of mental health.
oh, absolutely. And one of the things you that really stood out to me in that particular article you wrote about is that, again, we're going back to being misunderstood, that the idea of people in that generation being labeled as lazy when
Yeah.
I've come to understand through working with Julie and through her work and also listening. There's a wonderful podcast too that I like to listen to where they're talking about the sensitive autistic neurotype with components of ADHD, and there was a whole podcast on being labeled lazy. And when they really got to the root of it, and I know this is true for myself and my daughter, it's not, it has nothing to do with being lazy. It has to do with overcoming the fear of, a lot of us are perfectionists. So sometimes there's a struggle to get started on a project or reply to an email because we want to do it perfectly. We want to make sure that we do it the right way and then we get we express ourselves perfectly. So that creates a little container of worry, right? And then there's also can be hurdles as feeling like, well, do I put on a mask and go out and try to do it the quote normal way, or can I figure out a way to do whatever it is my way and express, can I get to a place of safety to do it my way? And that's not laziness, that's a lot of layers to work through, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that I imagine that to be a lifelong task because you never know what life is gonna throw around the corner. And I think we, one, need to have that awareness, but two, need to accept that that's a lifelong journey of accommodating for ourselves. And actually, we can see that in a really positive light because every time we learn something new about how we can accommodate ourselves, we're learning more about ourselves. And that enables us to connect with others.
Oh, I love that so much because it really is. And it's actually it's exciting to be the age you are, to be the age my daughter is, and to be here I am. I have several good friends in Julie's community that are in their late 50s. I'm 60, and we're like it's almost like we're born new, born again, like, oh my goodness, I can do so many things to make myself feel supported. And wouldn't you say, no matter if we're talking to little girls in high school, girls your generation, 30s, 40s, all the way up through mine and older, that speaking to ourselves with self-compassion and kindness, isn't that the key? Particularly if we aren't able to find the resources around us that are seeing our value, that are seeing us for who we really are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because we're so sensitive, but we probably speak to ourselves sometimes in the most critical of ways that we would never speak to anybody else or would want to be spoken to by anyone else. And that's what we spend our lives trying to prevent. When if we took some time to really gather the tools to enable us to speak to ourselves with self-compassion and love and speak to ourselves how we would speak to other people, then yeah, I think our quality of lives and mental health would get miles better.
Oh, that was perfect how you said it. And it made me think of like we could catch ourselves, right? And then we could stop and we could make a little pause and just say, what if we were our best friend or our child or our little self? Would we have just said that to them? We can catch ourselves with love and say, okay, wow, that sounded really harsh. Is that really what I want to say to myself? And a lot of us, that you and me, that have dealt with a situation where our parents were doing their very best, but we needed to be the chameleon. We needed to be the people pleaser. We needed to have a mask of perfection on. I think we're unraveling those tapes because they were the ones we looked up to. So if they said we were too sensitive, of course that's what we believed, you know. And again, we don't want to bash anybody's parents, but it's just like the people doing the autism assessments. They're looking through one specific lens. They grew up seeing certain things as normal, that's normal behavior, and then people that were artistic, creative, expressed themselves in a different way, were musicians, people that wrote songs that they couldn't identify with, that everybody puts that into a box of they're way out here on some other planet being so strange, when really they're being their authentic self. And what we're doing is encouraging people, aren't we, of all ages, to come forward and find some way to find a safety where you can actually be yourself.
Yeah.
So this would be a great time as we wrap up for you to share about the Lonely Club. How can people tell us a little bit about it? How can people connect with you? Don't worry about I'll make sure all your links are in the show notes so people can find it. But I just want them to hear straight from you because it's so amazing what you've created.
Yeah. So I set up the Lonely Club on a social media platform, kind of an online community, about 2.5 years ago now, actually, when I was doing my journalism masters. So I specialised in writing about the loneliness epidemic amongst young people, which became a very passionate interest of mine. And I thought there wasn't enough spaces online where young people were speaking about this topic.
No.
Even amongst like loneliness charities, I thought there was such a focus on older people and loneliness. And when I dug into the research, especially after the pandemic, it showed that young people are the most lonely age group, and no one was talking about it. So I set up this platform. This was probably a year and a half before I even was aware that I might be autistic or my brain might be neurodivergent. And now it all makes sense because fast forward 2.5 years, the reason I've always experienced these bouts of loneliness and also why I wanted to express it so openly and create a safe space for other young people to connect is because I my brain works differently for one, but also because I've always felt so different than everybody else. And I have this different way of connecting and communicating that I've always felt was too much. But the Lonely Club for me has been this like portal where I'm allowed to just be myself. And moving forward, I just want to empower other young people to come and be themselves and kind of destigmatize loneliness for one, because as I said earlier, like loneliness is a very human emotion and it shows that you're human because as humans, we're craving social connection. So that is the first step. And then you can find communities and spaces like the Lonely Club to come and connect and just show up as your authentic self. Um, so I'm really, really excited for the kind of growing journey of the Lonely Club. This past year, I've been hosting walks in London for lonely young people in the city.
Wow.
And yeah, in 2026, I'm evolving on from these walks to create a physical drop-in space for socially anxious, neurodivergent people to come and drop in. And it will be a sensory friendly, inclusive,
Oh,
really chilled, low pressure space where there will be options to go for a Sunday stroll or go for a coffee, or you can just sit there and you can do a solo activity like reading a book or doing some journaling. There's no pressure. But what I want to create is just this space where young people can show up however they're feeling in the moment.
oh. Wow, Laura, what an incredible gift you're giving the world. You're giving your own generation. I can't even imagine how amazing that would have felt when I was at school, when I was in my 20s. I mean, I basically would just hide in my room. I had a cat that I felt connected to, and that was about it. So I
Yeah.
just think what you're doing is incredible. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for us to keep supporting your work and our work here in the sensitive empowerment community. I look forward to creating more podcast episodes with you. I'm imagining we could do one live in the community where members can come and hear you speaking, ways to connect your community and the sensitive empowerment community is so inspiring because our community we have Lucy is the youngest in the community. Once you're 18, you can join. But what I love about your community is that you have tailored it to exactly what you wish that you had at that age, and you are going to help so many to not be alone in their room feeling completely isolated. I applaud what you're doing. I'm so impressed. I'm so proud of you, and I think you're an incredible role model, Laura. I'm so happy that you took the time to talk with us today, and I know you're going to reach a lot of people.
Thank you so much. This has been beautiful. Thank you.
You are welcome, and I look forward to us talking again. I hope you have a wonderful rest. It's going to be the evening for you there, right? Because you're in Lisbon and I'm in California. But this has just been just an incredible conversation that I know is going to lift so many people up. And so, for everyone listening, if you want to connect with Laura, with the Lonely Club, and all of her amazing work, the blog that we referenced, all of that will be linked in the show notes so you can easily find it. And if you are looking for a high quality autism assessment from someone who is of that neurotype herself, who is a global leader, Laura and I both recommend Julie Bjelland, and I'll put that link too. She's changing lives just like Laura is. So thank you, Laura, and we'll talk again
Thank you so
soon.
much.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.